Hello and most welcome to 806 of the series. We will today continue with the article of Francis E. Lin, Wittgenstein on thinking as a process or an activity. And we will continue where we left off on page 3. Last time we discussed that thinking is not what it seems to be, that it has deeper levels, and our constant reducing it to images, one of the most common mistakes, so to speak, or misconceptions, lead to false beliefs about the nature of thinking, giving it a precise shape that is strictly after the fact will reduce thinking, make it not shine through as much as it deserves to do. We have had a quote from Paul Johnston, obviously, and also quotes from Hacker. PMS Hacker does not really seem to fit with the Wittgensteinian understanding. He falls short of a complete understanding. But more about that now. So Francis E. Lin, Wittgenstein on thinking as a process or an activity. And the last quote was from Johnston himself, the maestro. And I think I'll repeat it because it's very noteworthy. Another problem is that not all thoughts can easily be presented in pictures. This is true not only of abstract ideas, but also everyday thoughts. For example, it is unclear what images correspond to the thought. It's a pity. I didn't stay at the meeting longer because although it was boring, I might have got the opportunity of having a quiet word with N. As Johnston's example illustrates, having images is insufficient for such complex thoughts. But this only shows that having images is insufficient for certain cases of thinking. To say that having images is in general insufficient for thinking, we must show that it is possible that one has images in the mind, but he is not thinking. It is difficult to find remarks in Wittgenstein's writings directly on this issue. Dreaming is a relevant example. When one dreams, he has a series of images going through his mind. But is he thinking? This question seems not to admit of a straight yes or no answer. But consider the following case. I play a tape recorder which pronounces the word tree once every 5 seconds. And I train myself to conjure up a mental image of a tree on hearing the sound tree. So I become skilled that on hearing the word, the image of a tree automatically comes up in my mind. Now suppose on the 1000th time I hear the word and I get a mental image of a tree. I should say that I am not really thinking about a tree on this occasion. This shows that having a mental image is not sufficient for thinking. What the above establishes is that having images is neither necessary nor sufficient for thinking. Wittgenstein also uses this method to show that talking, inner speech, etc. are also unnecessary and insufficient for thinking, as we shall see later. This is one way of showing that having images is not thinking. Wittgenstein, in fact, has another way of achieving this result, to which I shall now return. Johnston discusses a third problem with the idea that thinking is having mental images. Images by themselves are dead, and they seem to need thinking to give them life. So having images cannot be the same as thinking. But he fails to explain why images by themselves are dead. Neither does he make clear whether this is Wittgenstein's idea. I want now to point out that the idea is indeed Wittgenstein's, and that he himself discusses it quite extensively. Since this idea of the deadness of images and other entities is very important, I shall try to explicate it in detail. To see that images are dead, Wittgenstein suggests us to replace images with pictures or drawings, etc. If the meaning of the sign, roughly that which is of importance about the sign, is an image built up in our minds when we see or hear the sign, then first let us adopt the method we just described of replacing this mental image by some outward object seen. That is a painted or modeled image. Then why should the written sign plus this painted image be alive if the written sign alone was dead? In fact, as soon as you think of replacing the mental image by, say, a painted one, and as soon as the image thereby loses its occult character, it ceases to seem to impart any life to the sentence at all. It was, in fact, just the occult character of the mental process which you needed for your purposes. What this remarks says is this: the signs of language, for instance, words, by themselves seem dead, but they are alive. We are tempted to think that signs can invoke mental images, and consequently that mental images give signs life. But if we replace images by painted pictures, we shall find that images are as dead as pictures. For pictures are not just some marks. For pictures are just some marks on the paper too. So images cannot have the occult ability to impart life to science. The gist of Wittgenstein's remark is clear, but there are two questions. First, what does it mean to say that signs and pictures are dead or alive? Second, why are images as dead as pictures? Let us investigate them in turn. First, what does it mean to say that signs are dead or alive? There's a remark in PG that bears on this question. Is it the same if we speak of something that makes the difference between paper money and mere printed bits of paper, something that gives it its meaning, its life? Money is alive, but mere printed bits of paper are dead. And this is because the former has meaning, while the latter do not. So to say that signs are alive or dead is to say that they have or do not have meaning. There's another way of understanding the notion of life, lifelessness. Consider pictures first. Wittgenstein writes, a picture, whatever it may be, can be variously interpreted. Hence, this picture too, in its turn, stands isolated. when one has the picture in view by itself, it is suddenly dead, and it is as if something had been taken away from it, which had given it life before. It remains isolated. It does not point outside itself to a reality beyond. Any picture can be variously interpreted. Excuse me. For example, a portrait of N can be about various persons, and it does not point outside itself to a reality beyond. That is it by itself does not reach up to the person N of which it is a portrait. This is what Wittgenstein means by saying that pictures are dead. Similarly, signs are dead by themselves too. Take the word N, for instance, which Wittgenstein talks about on many occasions. Suppose that I utter the sentence, I am expecting N. The sign N can be variously interpreted and by itself cannot capture the very person N. So the sign N by itself is dead. In the two examples just presented, the sign N and the portrait by themselves are dead. But they are alive. Because it is the person N that I am expecting, and the portrait is a portrait of N, not of any old person. So how is this possible? We are tempted to think that it is our mental act of thinking which establishes such a connection and which gives the sign or the portrait life. This leads naturally to the second question posed above. I have just explained what it means to say that signs and pictures by themselves are dead. There's a temptation to think that images impart life to signs. Now Wittgenstein suggests us to replace images with pictures. Since pictures are dead by themselves, images cannot fare better. An image is a picture in the mind. It can also be variously interpreted, and it by itself cannot capture a reality. We expected thinking to give life to signs. Now Wittgenstein lets us see clearly that having images cannot fill the role expected of thinking. So having images cannot be the same as thinking. In this subsection, we have seen that Wittgenstein has two ways of showing that thinking is not having images. First, having images is neither necessary nor sufficient for thinking. Second, images by themselves are dead, and thinking is required to give them life. So having images cannot be the same as thinking. As we shall see below. Wittgenstein also employs these two methods to show that thinking is not talking, inner speech, etc. Two. Thinking is not talking. When we think, we often talk. So we might be tempted to say that thinking is talking. Wittgenstein wants us to see that talking is neither sufficient nor necessary for thinking by doing the following experiment. Say, yes, this pen is blunt. Oh well, it'll do. First with thought, then without thought. So when we think, we often talk. So we might be tempted to say that thinking is talking. Wittgenstein wants us to see that talking is neither sufficient nor necessary for thinking. By doing the following experiment. Say, yes, this pen is blunt. Oh well, it'll do. First with thought, then without thought. Then just think the thought without the words. Well, while writing, I might test the point of my pen, make a face, and then go on writing with a gesture of resignation. Wittgenstein asks us to do three things. First, speak the pen sentence. Yes, this pen is blunt. Oh well, it'll do with thought. This is what we usually do. When we normally speak, we are thinking. Second, speak the sentence without thought. How are we to do this? Wittgenstein in BBB explains that we could try to speak it automatically or mechanically. Suppose I tried deliberately to speak without thinking. What in fact would I do? I might read out a sentence from a book, trying to read it automatically. That is, trying to prevent myself from following the sentence with images and sensations, which otherwise it would produce. A way of doing this would be to concentrate my attention on something else while I was speaking the sentence. For instance, by pinching my skin hard while I was speaking. Hacker's exegesis of say, the sentence without thought. Mentions only the last sentence of the above quoted passage, but and thus does not.
Hej, förlåt. Pratar du med någon?
Say the sentence without thought mentions only the last sentence of the above quoted passage, thus does not fully explain how this task is to be done. The third task is to have the thought expressed by the pen sentence without the words. The second half of philosophical investigations quoted above explains how this is to be done. If I test the point of my pen, make a face, and then go on writing with a gesture of resignation, then I can be said to have the thought expressed by the pen sentence. We can all perform these three tasks because we can talk without thinking and also think without talking. Talking is neither sufficient nor necessary for thinking. Wittgenstein's second way of showing that thinking is not talking is to point out that talking by itself is dead, and I shall discuss it in the next subsection. And I think here is very apt to put a point to 806. I have some recommendable quotes here. So let's go to those. On page 5, I'm not completely sure what that would be in the PDF, but it's the third paragraph. Money is alive, but mere printed bits of paper are dead. And this is because the former has meaning, while the latter do not. So to say that signs or pictures are alive or dead is to say that they have or do not have meaning. There's another way of understanding the notion of lifelessness. And here we come to the nice quote here. A picture, whatever it may be, can be variously interpreted. Hence, this picture too, in its turn, stands isolated. When one has the picture in view by itself, it is suddenly dead, and it is as if something had been taken away from it, which had given it a life before. It remains isolated. It does not point outside itself to a reality beyond. So it goes to show here, everything is deeply connected. And once you take out something in isolation, you separate it. Like saying image is only a thought in your head or something within your head, then it turns into isolation. It is no longer in connection with something. And to say that it is dead is to show that it doesn't bear on things once in isolation, once it doesn't participate and have a relativity to other things. And this is, of course, very close to the quantum relativity of Carlo Rovelli, where we are led to the understanding meaning is only coming in the taking in of all relationships, every aspect. this is also very close to global reality as prospected by the three Nobel Prize laureates, Alain Aspect, Clauser, and Salinger, who show that reality is not local or in isolation and depictable as cause and effect, as atoms, or as separable things that could be put together to make a reality. No, the global perspective has to be taken into consideration. This is what makes it come to life, to have meaning. And I will here end. And until next time, I say thank you very much. Have a very pleasant day, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. Bye bye for now.